It's time for ROTD Weekend. If you are hosting a Thanksgiving dinner this year, it is probably this weekend that you are finalizing the menu, deciding exactly what you're going to make, which recipes you're going to use, all of that. And so I thought I would take a moment here and tell you my choices, what the menu is and which recipes I'm using. And that way, if you are kind of in that decision-making process, haven't decided everything, you can maybe grab some of my ideas, which will make your life easier. So I am starting just the day before Thanksgiving, no sooner than that. And I am starting by rubbing a whole turkey with salt all over and putting it on a rack on a pan in the fridge until just before roasting it. I'll take it out like an hour before cooking it, and then it comes up to room temperature a little bit and will cook more evenly. But that is what I'm doing the day before for the turkey, just dry brining it. That makes it a little bit more tender and gets the salt flavor right in there. And the day before, I am also doing some pumpkin pies. That is our favorite Thanksgiving dessert, and it is the only one I'm making. And I guess I'll say here that I've really streamlined over the years down to just what we love and cut out a lot of other stuff. If we all love pumpkin pie, then I don't need to make another dessert because we'll all be happy with that. You know what I mean? Then on the day, I will be actually roasting the turkey, and I'm going to be using that method I've told you about that my mom does that I love, where you take a big piece of aluminum foil and you rub butter all over it, and then you kind of stick that buttery side of the foil onto the turkey, and then you roast it for the first long while like that, and it kind of protects the breast meat from drying out and gets all that butter on there. You baste it a couple of times, and then at the end, you take the foil off so that the skin can get nice and crispy and bronze. And if you've seen my how to roast turkey video on social media, it is Cook the Story on Instagram and TikTok. That's where you're most likely to find those. You will see how gorgeous and brown that turkey gets. I will also be making my mom's stuffing muffins. I love these so much. It's essentially dressing or stuffing made of bread with just some poultry seasoning, salt, pepper that go into muffin tins so that they're perfectly portioned. But more importantly, they stay nice and moist on the inside, but get crispy on the outside. So everybody gets a little bit of crispy bit and a little bit of soft, moist bit. I love that about this recipe. And then I'm doing just standard mashed potatoes, just boiling them in salted water until they're fork tender. And then I drain them, put them back into the pot just for a minute to help evaporate off some of the water. And then it's butter and sour cream that I put in there, and always some black pepper, a little bit of salt to taste, mash that up. The wonderful thing about mashed potatoes is they stay hot for a really long time. So what I tend to do is finish mashing them in the pot, and then I'll put some aluminum foil down, touching them in the pot, and then the lid on top of that, and they stay warm for a long time. So I like mashed potatoes for a big dinner like this because they're really not very fussy in terms of timing, right? And then I will be doing a classic turkey gravy, and there is a recipe for that on Cook the Story as well. Yeah, I will link to everything that I have links for. So if you're doing your own meal planning here and listening to me, you can go to the show notes for this podcast episode, or go to cookthestory.com/ROTD and find the November 16th of 2024 episode. Click on that, and then all the links for these recipes will be there for you as well. Just scroll down and you will see them there. So that should help with your meal planning. So yeah, classic turkey gravy. Basically, I take the giblets from the turkey if it had any, or the neck also. And then sometimes I will cut off the wingtips if I don't think anybody's going to be eating them, if I'm not carving the turkey at the table. Cut off the wingtips, any skin that is sort of hanging off the turkey anywhere, that all goes into a pot with some aromatics, and I make a turkey stock out of that. And then I use that and the drippings from the turkey, which are going to have all that delicious butter that kind of browns in the bottom of the pan from that butter basted turkey I was telling you about. So I'm using those drippings and this stock to make a really delicious turkey gravy. And I make quite a bit of gravy. Like I'm saying like half a cup per person because I like to put it on the turkey. I like to put it on the stuffing. I like to put it on the mashed potatoes, and I like to have leftovers of all of those things just covered in gravy the next day as well. So I make a lot of gravy. And then it's just the side dishes, right? So I am doing a from scratch homemade green bean casserole. You basically roast some green beans, fresh green beans, and then you make like a bechamel sauce with mushrooms and onions, and then that gets mixed with the cooked roasted green beans, and then I top that with just like some panko breadcrumbs for some crunch. Sometimes I still go in with some of those crispy fried onions from the can on top as well, and that is one of the main side dishes. And the only other side dish I'm doing this year is the air fryer butternut squash that I was telling you guys about. It is so crazy good. It is just cut in half, the whole squash cut in half, and then you roast it, and towards the end you add the seeds from it, and then when it's done it gets a little bit of a spicy maple drizzle, and then that one squash serves, well, 6 people if I'm doing like normal dinner, but when there's all kinds of stuff like this, it easily serves 8. You just cut each of those halves into 4 pieces and you serve them with the seeds, and that is a side dish. And because it's being done in the air fryer, it's just perfect. It's not taking up my stove or my oven or anything. And I think that's everything that we're doing. So it's the butter basted turkey with the turkey gravy, mashed potatoes, stuffing muffins, from scratch green bean casserole, and the air fryer butternut squash with its seeds and the maple spicy drizzle, and then pumpkin pie. Oh, and I do homemade whipped cream with quite a bit of vanilla in it. I like that a lot. And I'll say, you know, I mentioned that we're doing the pumpkin pies. My pumpkin pie recipe is so killer. It's so good. It's extra spiced. So I basically take the old recipe that was on like the Libby's can. I think it was from the Libby's can. And that is the one that my mom used, but she always doubled the amount of spices. So double the cinnamon, double the ginger, double the cloves. So that is what I do as well. And it is just, it tastes almost like pumpkin gingerbread. It is amazing. So I will link to that, of course, for you as well. And that is my planned Thanksgiving dinner. I would love it if you would email me and tell me what you are making. That is Christine@cookthestory.com. Let me know. And if you have any questions or need a link to a recipe or anything, email me with that as well. I'm happy to help. Now we are going to turn to a wonderful conversation that might actually even supply another great recipe for your Thanksgiving dinner. Today, I am talking with Sarah Bond, who has degrees in nutrition and food science. She is the blogger behind liveeatlearn.com and also has the cookbook Eat 100 Easy Vegetarian Recipes You Will Make Again and Again. Sarah is here to talk a bit about food science and to share a delicious recipe. You are going to love this so much. Listen to my conversation with Sarah Bond. Sarah Bond, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I am excited to talk with you. You are a food scientist, or that's one of your hats. Can you tell me how you got into food science? Where did this start?
Yeah, so I run a vegetarian food blog called Live, Eat, Learn, and that kind of led me to food science along the way. So I have a bachelor's in nutrition. I graduated in 2014, and shortly after I started my site, but I realized that I actually had no idea how to cook once I graduated. So I knew everything about like the health aspects of food, but I really didn't know like how to make food that tasted good. So I started this blog as a way sort of documenting my learning how to cook. And then along the way, I realized I wanted to sort of take it to the next level. And so I went into a master's program for food science, specifically sensory science. So this is basically how you can change different elements of food to sort of change your sensory experience of it. And so most people who have sensory degrees don't work as like a food blogger. Most of my friends who have jobs in the industry work with like the food industry. So testing different, like I have a friend who tests like different coffee products to sort of change the elements of the taste there. Or I have a friend who works for a flavor house. So she like develops flavors for companies. But I develop recipes for a living. So yeah,
Yeah.
kind of fun.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay, I now I have so many questions. I talked with a guy once I interviewed him on the show from Oxford, who does things like they tape weights to the bottom of Coca-Cola cans to see if like the weight of the can affects your enjoyment of the taste. Have you heard of this kind of thing?
Yeah, that's exactly something that a sensory scientist might work on, like how do different elements of the food, because obviously there's like taste and texture and smell, but there's also the feel of things. And so
Hmm.
weight would be tied into the feel of something. How can that influence how you like it or how you perceive it? And so, yeah, it's really interesting how like all these different elements related to your senses can influence food.
Hmm. Hmm. Even like what you're
Yeah.
listening to while you're eating or something, right?
Yeah. Or the temperature in the room or the way that it sounds. When I did it, when I got my master's, I had an internship and my entire job for 6 months was to test mayonnaise. So we had a panel of taste testers who are professional taste testers trained on tasting mayonnaise. And they were great at it. Like they would test it based on like the color and the creaminess and like all these different attributes. And so it really is interesting to see like how many things go into the products that are on the shelves, the things that you buy every day have been through rigorous testing with food scientists and sensory scientists.
That is fascinating. Can I ask, did you have a master's thesis as part of this program?
Yeah,
What
yeah.
was,
So mayonnaise was my master's
that was your
thesis.
thesis?
Yeah, it was part of it. And then another part was like we were looking at soups and I think it was like how filling they were based on like what was in it.
Mhm.
And so it was sort of looking at like what elements of a food make it filling to people, all things
Mhm.
being equal, like them being the same amount of like calories and everything. So
Things like
yeah,
potatoes or something that like the or the
yeah.
bean
Or like
texture
how
or something.
chewy it is. Like if it's chewier,
Oh,
does that make you think it's more filling because it's spending more time in your mouth versus if it's like a smooth thing? Is it? Yeah. So
wow. I had not thought
yeah.
of that. That's fascinating. Okay, so now I need to know, how does this impact your recipe development when you're creating recipes on your website? What are you putting these recipes through and how is that training impacting it?
Well, at a very basic level, it helps me to understand sort of the balance of flavors. And so it's made it a lot easier for me to find what's missing from a recipe. Like if something is too salty, you can always add something acidic to sort of balance it out or something sweet to balance it out. But then it also sort of brought like a scientific approach that I've been really sort of diving into lately, specifically with like recreating store-bought things. Like I love
Mm.
to buy something at the store and then try and like re-engineer the ingredients label. And so people have really been liking that lately. And I think that's really given me sort of a foundation to understand how to do that. So yeah, so definitely it's not the traditional route, but it's definitely helped with recipe development for the blog.
So, do you find that like so you're starting with a product that you've bought and trying to engineer that ingredient list? Do you end up like you don't look at the ingredient list first and then you look at it after? Do you end up pretty close, or could it be completely different but it tastes the same and it doesn't matter? Like what happens there?
Oh, that's a good question. When I'm recreating a store-bought one, I usually look at the ingredients label
Okay.
because it'll say what's in there like by weight.
Hmm.
And so if I'm really trying to recreate something, like what's one I remade recently was a vegan liquid mozzarella, which is like already a total science experiment. And so I just turned to the ingredients label and then I tried to sort of re-engineer, their techniques and their amounts. And so in those cases, I am like going based on what they've put. But yeah, it's always it's kind of like a fun puzzle to figure out.
Sorry, what is vegan liquid mozzarella? Or what is liquid mozzarella? I have so many questions.
Like casual. It's basically like I saw it in the store once and I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. And I'm not personally vegan, but I just love like trying things like this. And so the idea is that it's like a creamy vegan thing. I wouldn't call it a sauce because you pour it onto pizza dough and then you bake it. And then
Oh.
once it's baked, like it looks like buffalo mozzarella.
So it
And
starts
so
out liquid and then it congeals into
yeah,
cheese form.
and then it congeals. Yeah, so it's like a lot
Lovely.
of starches and flavorings and yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
that
yeah.
was a fun one to recreate just because it's like such a science experiment. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So you're not vegan, but you have a new vegetarian cookbook out. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I just released my vegetarian cookbook. It's called Eat, and it contains over 100 easy vegetarian recipes. So I've been doing this for like 10 years, creating recipes and sharing them online. And along the way, there's just been quite a few reader favorites that have really, come to the forefront, and people make them every year. And so I wanted to create something that readers could have, that they could like physically hold and keep in their kitchens. And so this is a book of mostly reader favorites and a few of my personal favorites. And yeah, it was just released in July. Yeah, it's been really fun to sort of, because we didn't work with a publisher, we did it all ourselves. So it's been kind of fun to just design and write and get printed. And now we're in the shipping phase. So anyone who buys a book gets it directly from our house here in Denver.
Oh, wow. That's so cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Thank you.
So, Sarah, have you brought a surprise recipe for me?
Yes.
I'm excited.
So my recipe is smashed Brussels sprouts.
Oh.
So it's a really simple one, but this recipe went insanely viral on social media. It has over 45 million views.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy.
Yeah. And so I've been trying to figure out like why it went so viral. Like it's really good. Like we'll get to why it's so tasty. But I think it's also that Brussels sprouts, I feel like, are one of those things that like people might order at a restaurant, or they might have it somewhere, and then they're always dreaming of like that Brussels sprout recipe they had that they can't quite recreate at home. And this recipe sort of achieves that.
I love it. Okay. Where do you start when you're making these Brussels sprouts?
All right. So basically the recipe is you pre-cook the Brussels sprout, you smash it, and then you bake it until crispy. And so doing this sort of makes all these like craggly edges to the Brussels sprout that makes it sort of crispy and brown. And it just totally elevates the flavor without having to like fry it or anything.
This is, I think it was first Nigella Lawson that I saw do this, but I think it's traditional English way of doing roasted potatoes, right? Where you parboil the potatoes. This isn't to smash them, but then you bang them around in the pot a little bit. And then you add them to hot oil in like a pan that you've heated oil in, and you get all those little extra edges from having cooked the potatoes so that they're nice and soft in the middle, but then all those little jagged edges from bashing them a little bit. And that's what makes all the crispiness. It's the same idea.
Yeah. That's where all the flavor is. It's just in that crunchy exterior. Because I think Brussels sprouts, like if you do them wrong, they just get mushy, and then it's just something that it's like the thing on your plate that's like the chore. And so this kind of turns it into the star of the show because it's like crispy, tender on the inside, and then there's just so much flavor packed into like the brown bits.
I think the tender on the inside is important too, because I've had them way too many times where like almost you can imagine maybe they were cooked in an air fryer or something and they've gotten nice and brown on the outside. They look fantastic. There's some kind of glaze on them, but you bite into them and it's almost, I want to say squeaky in the middle. Do you know what I mean? Like nice and crunchy outside, and then like, oh, now I'm chewing a lot and I don't want that.
Yeah, no, exactly. I know exactly what you mean. So the first step in this one is to boil it. And I think that is what sort of prevents that chewy, like squeakiness. So basically you'll just get a pot of water boiling, you'll add your Brussels sprouts and you'll cook them. You're going to par cook them. So basically just until they're like tender enough to smash. The point of the step is to get them smashable. So if you didn't want to boil them, like if you were looking out for nutrient preservation, you could steam them, or you could microwave them. Basically anything to get them tender.
Do you salt the water when you're cooking them?
I like to. Yeah, the recipe doesn't require it because there's salt later, like in a seasoning. But yeah, I like when I'm cooking for my family, I like to salt the water just to make it like sort of elevates the flavor a bit.
Yeah, for sure. It gets right in there too. Yeah. Okay, so you boil them until they're probably what you're saying, like not quite fork tender, but soft.
Yep. So then you drain them, and then I like to rinse them under cold water just to totally stop the cooking process because you don't want to overcook them. And so usually once I've drained them, I'm just rinsing them with cold water, and then I'm patting them dry. Because at this point now they're cold and you want them to be dry because water is the enemy of crispiness.
Yes. You know what? Okay, now I'm going to talk about potatoes again, but like the number of times that I've watched somebody like gonna make, roasted potatoes or something, and they peel their potatoes and they wash them off and then they toss them with oil in a pan. And I'm like, well, no, you have to dry them first. Dry them off. Because water and oil don't mix too, right? So you're doing this like you're putting a coating on the food that then the oil doesn't want to adhere to.
And just slides right off.
Yeah. Okay. Pat them dry. I love this. I love that we're on the same page about this, but I didn't know to do this with Brussels sprouts. No idea. Okay. So what's next?
Well, I've also seen recently what you could do is like put them back in a hot pan and then just sort of shake it up. And like, especially the potatoes, it would kind of chuff them up like in the one recipe you were talking about, but it also kind of helps the steam to escape. So I guess you could do that here. You could put them back in the hot pan and just sort of shake them to get the moisture off.
And maybe even like if you didn't want to, I think you're about to smash them each individually, but I'm pre-guessing. You could probably like put them in that pot, which is going to evaporate off some of the water, and maybe like a potato masher just gently to kind of smoosh them a bit.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And then anyways, let's see what you actually normally do.
Well, yeah. So the next step is to smash them, but we're doing it a little differently.
Okay.
So you'll basically transfer them to a parchment lined baking sheet, and then you're going to spread them out into a single layer. And then from there, you're just going to take a cup or a glass, or you could even take like a potato masher, and you're just going to smash each of them individually. And it should be pretty easy because they're pretty tender at this point. But the idea is to get them pretty flat. I'm thinking like a quarter of an inch to half an inch. And that's going to make them, sort of have more surface area. One, for crispiness and browning, but then also so that any of that moisture that's in the Brussels sprout can evaporate in the oven.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then from there, we will flavor them. So I like to drizzle them with some olive oil. And then for this specific recipe, I really like using salt, pepper, and nutritional yeast. Have you tried nutritional yeast before?
I have. So yes, I did a like yoga teacher training at a vegan place and was there a lot. And we would do like a toast with nutritional yeast for breakfast quite often. It's interesting. It's nice.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like, so it's like a vegan flaky yeast product, but it tastes cheesy and eggy and sort of savory. And so it really works well with Brussels sprouts, which can sometimes be bitter. So it sort of balances out those flavors. It kind of gives it like a Brussels sprout Parmesan flavor without cheese.
I was just going to ask if somebody wanted to do, have you tried it with Parmesan cheese? Like, because the cheese would crisp up in a different way from the Brussels sprouts and a different way from the nutritional yeast, I assume, but probably not bad.
Yeah, no, it would be really good. And I've tried it with this one. So sometimes if I'm feeling like fancy, I'll do mounds of Parmesan cheese all over the parchment lined baking sheet. And then you'll put a Brussels sprout on top of the Parmesan mound. And then you'll smash it. So you're really smashing it into the cheese. And then as it bakes, it sort of all, crisps up together and it becomes so good. And they're almost like Brussels sprout chips at that point.
Have you done this video on Instagram for like round 45 million part 2?
Yeah. That's actually, maybe I'll do that when we get off this call.
I love that idea. But no, I know, because you can make you make like Parmesan crisps by little mounds of Parmesan baked in the oven or in a frying pan, and then they're crispy. And now you've put the Brussels sprout. And you're right, it's totally going to counter that bitterness, cabbagey flavor that some people don't like.
Yeah.
That cheese.
I think we'd need to adjust the cooking times a little because the next step is to bake it in a 425 degree oven for 25 to 30 minutes. And usually if you're doing like Parmesan crisps, it's like 10 minutes, like it's pretty short. So I think we'd have to finesse like, finding the balance of like getting the Brussels sprouts nice and crispy while also having like that perfect crunch to the Parmesan.
Yeah. I bet your food science skills will help with that.
This might be an experiment I need to run for research.
So wait, I just want to back up though, because I want to make sure, okay, the original recipe with the nutritional yeast, you're smashing the Brussels sprouts with a spoon and then you're drizzling them with oil and salt, pepper, and nutritional yeast, or tossing them. How are you getting that on?
Yes, you can do it either way. So you can either toss the Brussels sprouts with all the seasonings, put them on the sheet and smash them. Or what I've liked doing recently, just because it's one less dish, is to put them on the sheet, smash them, and then just sprinkle them with all the stuff sort of evenly. Right. So it doesn't get quite as even, I guess, because you're not like stirring it all together. But you don't want to stir it once they're smashed because then they're kind of tender and the leaves might not be fully attached to the stem anymore. So then you might be like losing leaves in the process. So usually once they're smashed, they need to just stay on the sheet where they were smashed.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Okay. And so then they're seasoned, they're on the pan, and they're going, and you said 425 for 20 minutes?
25 to 30 minutes.
And they'll be nice and brown. And then is that it? Is there anything else?
That's pretty much it. I like to serve it with a sauce kind of as like a dippable thing. So this one's really good with a pesto mayo. I'll do like a 1-to-1 ratio of pesto and mayonnaise. And yeah, it's just so good.
Yeah, no, it sounds amazing. And I love that like you've thought through this process of, you want crispy, you want tender, and the surface area, all of that is like coming together to make these perfect bites.
Yeah. Well, because I think like when people say they don't like vegetables, I think a lot of people were served or like have only experienced like mushy vegetables, like steamed veggies, or worse, like boiled veggies. And so I think like having those crispy, crunchy, sort of caramelized edges really elevates it and makes you forget that that the vegetable is potentially just a side dish.
I'm gonna try this one on my kids because they do not like Brussels sprouts, but I think they might like this one. So I'm gonna give it a try. And I want it anyway, so I'm gonna try it on them, but really it's so that I get to have it.
Well, and recently what I've been doing for this one too is like adding hot honey to it, and that's also really good.
So that's at the
end.
Just
microwave together, like right before you serve it, I do like a tablespoon of honey and then like a teaspoon of crushed red pepper flakes, and then I microwave it just to like kind of get the heat sort of infusing the honey with the peppers. And then just drizzle that over it, and it's so good because then the sweetness is like the perfect balance for the Brussels sprouts.
Would you still serve that with the pesto mayonnaise, or would you do something different?
I probably would just take out the pesto mayonnaise in that case and just drizzle, because then it doesn't really even need a sauce, because then the honey is like so much sort of sticky moisture.
Oh, that sounds so good. Oh, Sarah, thank you so much. I am so excited. Yeah. Can you let people know where they can find you online if they want more of these great sciencey delicious recipes? Yeah. Where should they go?
Yeah, my blog is called Live, Eat, Learn. You can find me on all the social media and on my website. And then in my new cookbook called Eat, I have a choose your adventure of smashed veggies. So I kind of walk you through how to make smashed veggies with virtually any vegetable. And I have a bunch of like seasoning options, a bunch of different cooking options. So it's kind of like a fun mix and match of whatever you want to do with the veggies. So
I love
that is on my website as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I told you there was another Thanksgiving idea there. If you are looking for another side dish for Thanksgiving, definitely check out Sarah's Brussels sprouts on liveeatlearn.com. Thank you, Sarah. That was a great conversation and such an amazing recipe. Now, as to what I am cooking this week, it is not yet Thanksgiving, and so I am not doing my Thanksgiving cooking this week. Instead, I am, of course, doing recipes for the website, and I think I told you that I was going to finally break down and do a pierogi recipe on the site. You know, I grew up working in my parents' Ukrainian restaurants, and so pierogies are something I really do know how to make. I have made more than probably just about anybody my age in the world. It wouldn't surprise me, but like really, really know how to make pierogies. And so that is finally going onto the site. I think I resisted for a long time because it's something that I just sort of know how to do almost like muscle memory, and I was worried I wouldn't be able to explain it properly. But since I'm getting better at doing those recipe videos that I put on social media and on the website, I'm doing those videos, I am pretty sure that by filming the whole process, I'm going to be able to break it down much more easily and explain it, and then you can make delicious homemade pierogies as well. So that is happening this week. And also, we are starting to gear up and get ready for, game day season. I think of it as this is, lead up to Super Bowl happening January, February. And so we are sprucing up some of our chicken wing recipes that we've had for a long time, doing some new pictures, new videos, just a little bit more information in there, and also some new chicken wing recipes to add into the mix. So I am starting on that this week. As to what is going live on my sites this week, well, actually, there is a Brussels sprouts recipe going live on the Cookful. It is for roasted Brussels sprouts with bacon, so that is a really nice one. They get nice and brown. Some of the leaves get extra crispy, and there's bacon in the mix. And I actually made this recipe, I think, in a very interesting way. The bacon and Brussels sprouts are originally cooked together on a pan. That renders the fat out of the bacon and softens the Brussels sprouts. And then after that, the bacon is chopped up and then the Brussels sprouts are tossed with the chopped bacon and they finish cooking. So it's like one pan, but like multiple components happening to make this one dish, you know? So that is going live on the Cookful. And then on Cook the Story, I know I've told you about this before. I am publishing a recipe for cocktail sauce without horseradish in it. And that is because I got questions from people asking if they could make cocktail sauce without horseradish. And I decided to give it a test and figure it out. And yes, there's a way to do it. So if you are somebody who either doesn't like horseradish or just doesn't tend to have it and wants to use things that you do have, this is possibly a recipe for you. And now, what is going on this podcast this week? If you are subscribed and getting a new episode every day, you have a lot of like pre-Thanksgiving stuff coming. Oh, that cocktail sauce without horseradish is on here. There's dry brining a turkey. I was talking about that. There's a delicious compound butter for turkey, like specifically designed to either rub under the skin of your turkey. You could put this on the foil like I was talking about, or you can serve it with the turkey, either melted or just at room temperature to kind of spread onto your hot turkey. Really, really nice. There is an air fryer acorn squash done similarly to that butternut squash I was telling you about. So you get the squash halves and the seeds, and that Brussels sprouts and bacon recipe. I'm also telling you about that. Oh, and how to roast turkey in parts. This is such a great technique if you have a smaller group, or if you only like dark meat or only like white meat. You can just get exactly what your family loves, and it is a great way to do a turkey dinner. So that is what's happening on this podcast this week. If you are not already subscribed, what are you waiting for? Head over to cookthestory.com/ROTD. And if you do that on your phone, you'll see the little buttons at the top for like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whichever one you like to listen to podcasts on. You just want to tap on that and then hit follow or subscribe when you get there, or just go on your phone to your favorite podcast app, whatever you usually listen to, and search for Recipe of the Day. There you'll find me. I am everywhere. Actually, I've even started putting the podcast episodes or like trailers for them, the first like minute, on social media. So if you just want to see what I'm talking about and hear a little bit of it, they are on TikTok and they are on Instagram. And there's even a playlist on TikTok for the podcast, so you can see them there. I am Cook the Story in both of those places, so you can find out what I am talking about there as well. I want to say a big thank you to Sarah Bond from liveeatlearn.com for being an amazing guest and bringing us such a tasty recipe. And thank you for listening. I am Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, the all-new chicken cookbook, and from this podcast, Recipe of the Day. I hope you have a great weekend. Let's get cooking.